might not be a Tom Ford suit or something. You might not be wearing a Jordan sweatsuit. You might look a little poor and impoverished, a bit haggardy or haphazard. Those things you might not look the part.
Yeah. Woo. You need reactions and be ready in a second. Want the lower baby court is now in session. Yeah. You need reactions and be ready in a second. Want the lower baby court is now in session. Let's go.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to another exciting episode of Attorney Session Reacts. I'm your host, Attorney Marcus Session. Today's video, this is a disgrace. It's inhumane. Stephen A. Smith gives his take on a new Texas immigration law. Thank you guys for always tuning in. Please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and let's jump right into it.
Greg Abbott, you ever heard of him? He's the governor for the state of Texas. On Monday, that governor, Governor Abbott, signed a bill into law that will allow the police to arrest migrants who enter the U.S. illegally.
What Stephen A. Smith is referring to is Texas Senate Bill 4, and Senate Bill 4 is pretty much about building barriers on the Texas side of the Texas-Mexico border, the land to which Governor Abbott can control, actually. Through this bill, it also creates a state crime for illegally crossing the Texas-Mexico border.
This law, which takes effect in March, allows any Texas law enforcement officer to arrest people who are suspected of entering the country illegally.
Throughout this video, I'm going to make 4 points that are going to be just my commentary, just 4 points. The first point I want to make is that anytime we allow law enforcement to make discretions based on their hunches or their personal perceptions, we dance with the certainty that bias will abide. And what I mean by that is that we're going to give them the sole discretion and the autonomy to pull people over and detain people just because they look a certain way. This takes us back to Nazi Germany, where anti-Semitic policies were enacted so law enforcement and other agents of the state could treat people, detain people who looked Jewish, who appeared Jewish, who were Jewish. They could arrest them, they could detain them, and pretty much do anything they wanted with them. So the dangers of this bill are enormous. That's the first point I wanted to make.
This is bad, ladies and gentlemen. And before I go a step further, there's an individual by the name of Krish, K-R-I-S-H, Omara Vignarajah, V-I-G-N-A-R-A-J-A-H. That person is the CEO of Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service, says, quote, by criminalizing the very act of seeking refuge, Texas is turning its back on the values of compassion and due process that make our nation the world's beacon of humanitarian leadership. That is one way to put it.
The second point I want to make, and it kind of argues with the point that Stephen A. is making right now. This law is not going to make legalized methods or methods of relief that the federal government has allowed through immigration law policy. For instance, the federal government offers asylum relief for individuals that make it to a valid port of entry. They're able to enter that port of entry in custody of DHS, and they're able to get bonded out, and they're able to seek asylum accordingly. So those methods won't be criminalized through this bill. And it's important to make that distinction because anytime the federal government offers a legalized method for relief, yes, we do allow asylees and refugee seekers to come into the country and seek those forms of relief, and they will still be allowed. Now, if the Texas government tries to criminalize those, then it's going to feed into my fourth point even further.
There are various other ways to put it. This is a disgrace. It's inhumane. And it opens the floodgate to further divide our nation, because when you have law enforcement that literally can arrest people over a suspicion, think about that for a second. People can be arrested who are suspected of entering the country illegally. Do you realize that that means a law enforcement official can walk up to somebody, all right, they look Hispanic. Okay, their English is broken. They don't speak fluid English. So that could be a cause for me to arrest them. Let them deal with the problems later. Ladies and gentlemen, to get out of jail, bail costs money. It ain't free. To hire a lawyer, that costs money.
I had a client as an immigration law practitioner who had to pay a large sum of bail. They allowed themselves to be detained into the port of entry. They had to get bonded out, several thousands of dollars, and they are now seeking asylum. It's a process still that these individuals are going to have to pay and fork over money and other resources.
It ain't free. You have essentially opened up an avenue to incarcerate people for no cause whatsoever other than a particular law enforcement official's suspicion
and their perception. So my third point is it is the federal government's job to create, enforce, and regulate laws impacting immigrants in our country. So when a state tries to do so, well, that just kind of throws a rift within this idea of federalism.
That's what we're going to do to our Latino brothers and sisters. It's racist. Somebody needs to say it, so I'm going to say it. It's a racist ass thing to do. Suspicion? Suspected of entering the country illegally. How can you be suspected of entering the country illegally? So you chilling in downtown Dallas or Houston. You hanging out with a bunch of folks. You're speaking Spanish instead of English. Your clothes might not be a Tom Ford suit or something. You might not be wearing a Jordan sweatsuit. You might look a little poor and impoverished, a bit haggardy or haphazard. Those things you might not look the part. That's a suspicion. They can literally label that as suspicion to justify arresting you, not questioning you, not asking for an ID. They literally can arrest you.
That's actually what the bill says. I'm going to break down, if you tune in probably within the next week, I will break down this entire bill and clear up any other misconceptions that we may have about the bill. But on its face, this is pretty much what it says.
That's criminal. See, what we're really learning here is that there are levels of enslavement.
Strong.
Yeah, I can deport you, I could send you back, or I could keep you incarcerated. You can feed the system. Another body in there, we know the prisons throughout this nation, to some degree anyway, have been privatized. We do know that, right? You do know that there are people profiting off of folks getting incarcerated, right? If you don't believe me, go back and look at 13.
So he's speaking of the prison industrial complex, where in many states, prisons were privatized. They allowed these private developers, prison developers, to assume the state's role and responsibility for the incarceration of its citizens who were found guilty of crimes. And the state will give these prison developers money. They will pay them to handle the entire incarceration process for citizens found guilty of crimes and sentenced to serve time in these prisons.
That documentary on Netflix, directed by Ava DuVernay. Go back and look at things like that, and you'll see what I'm talking about. What a disgrace. And to think, I love this state from the standpoint that it's got no state income taxes. You got beautiful cities like Dallas and Houston and Austin, Texas. I'm looking forward to being in a city like that someday, and then I see a governor like this doing this kind of nonsense.
The last point I want to make is a comment towards what Governor Abbott intends to happen with this bill. He intends for a challenge to this bill to make it all the way up through the Supreme Court, where a majority of conservative Supreme Court justices will decide on this issue. And he's hoping that this conservative majority finds for him in his law. Their decision will greatly impact immigration law and policy in our country going forward. And you know I will keep you updated. Thank you guys for always tuning in. Please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I'm trying to get these numbers up. Help me to beat the algorithm. But thank you guys again, and as always, take it easy, my friends.
Let's go.